Generally, how many people actually wear their seatbelts? About 2 years ago, I got a phone call when I was with my mother that my stepdad and my baby brother had been in a car accident. Um, we weren't sure of like the seriousness of the accident or what exactly happened until we got there and talked to the officer. But before we got there, like the ride there, my mother didn't say anything. She was driving. I kept asking her what happened, what did they say, like what were their conditions, and she wouldn't say anything. So I eventually started yelling at her before we got to the hospital, like, what did they say? But she was in a state of panic because it's her husband and it was my brother. All we knew that they were in an accident and neither one of them had their seatbelts on. So we were just unsure. When we got to UT Hospital, the nurse came. She walked down the hall and she took us to a room and she talked to us and told us their condition. And like the whole time we were just wondering like what's going on, what happened. We were unsure until seeing them and seeing their condition. And I won't get into all their conditions and stuff, but basically it was because they didn't have their seatbelts on and they were ejected from the vehicle. And my youngest brother, he had head trauma and some face scrapes that were minor. And my stepdad, he had major head trauma. He just kept repeating himself and his head was busted open where he hit the concrete. It had pushed his scalp back. So his head was just open. And he still suffers from brain. Well, I think he acts a little slower than he used to. My sister and everybody else probably does too, but if he was wearing a seatbelt, then he probably wouldn't have been hurt as bad. But according to the Center for Disease Control, motor vehicle crashes are the leading cause of death for the first 30 years of our lives. Get the facts. Wearing a seatbelt is one of the easiest ways to prevent serious injury or death and should always be done, no matter what. Since their inventions in the 19th century, seatbelts have evolved to increase the safety of its passengers and drivers. The first seatbelt patent was in 1885 by a man named Edward from New York. The first model of seatbelt, I have a diagram, was the 2-point harness. Can you see it? Okay. Was the 2-point harness, which essentially was just a lap band. This model of seatbelt stayed for a while, and the first company to include them into their vehicles was Nash Motors in 1950. A lot of people still wear like the 2-point seat belts. If they have an older model car, they'll unclip it or they'll put it back behind their head, which is not safe because I do it sometimes. I get tired of the seat belt being up around my neck. However, still at this point, seat belts safety was not enforced as much. In 1959, the 3-point harness, which is this one, it's the modern one we have today, the over the shoulder, over the lap kind of thing. Can you see it? Zoom in so you can see good. In 1959, the 3-point safety belt was created, which is the same model that is still used today, like I just explained in the picture. It wasn't until 1968 that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration enforced the safety of seat belts and required all vehicles to have properly installed seat belts and safety harnesses and car seats for minor children. Even so, many of our grandparents or even parents weren't required to wear them. I remember stories that my grandmother used to tell me about not having to wear her seatbelt, and my mother too. And the car seats were much different, like big, I don't know what they were, but they were heavy. Stories about them not having to wear seatbelts. I think it's crazy that it took us this long for the law to catch up. In 1960, 41% unintentional injuries caused by deaths will result from motor vehicle accidents and and the general public not wearing their safety harnesses. Um, it wasn't until 1984 that the first state, New York, passes its first law against seatbelts, stating that you were required to wear one while traveling in a motor vehicle. This was a huge jump from the other states to get on board. In 2003, all 50 states had some form of seatbelt regulations. However, they vary between states depending on the age and size of the child. Primary states can be ticketed if traveling without seatbelts and safety 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 and safety. I can't say it. I can't get it out. What are they called for kids? Car seats properly installed for children, then you will be ticketed and fined for that. I'm sorry about that. Um, Tennessee is primary state, so drivers over the age of 16 will get ticketed if pulled over without wearing a seatbelt. Also, for Tennessee, this is only applies to drivers. However, it is extremely important for anyone driving or traveling to wear a seatbelt. Um, Even as a front passenger, sometimes I still don't buckle up. But if I get in the car with my brother, he's like, "Put your seatbelt on." Even in the back seat, he's like, "Put your seatbelt on." So I try to make it a habit. Or even with my younger brother that was in the car accident, when he gets in the car, he always reminds you to slow down, put your seatbelt on, um, because you're putting yourself in danger and others as well. Buckling up can reduce your risk of injury in a crash by 50%, especially considering that airbags were made to work with seatbelts. um, it's very important that you wear one, and even in the event something were going to happen, even if it didn't, it's just better to be safe than not have one. Um, 40,000 people were killed. 40,000 people were killed in motor vehicle accidents in 2017. That is 47% were not wearing safety belts. That is a large percentage for something that is so easily preventable. Wearing a seatbelt should be a second nature or the first thing you do when getting into the vehicle. I think this should be enforced in all vehicles because wearing your seatbelt is so important. Not only is it important for your own safety, but for the safety of others and the other passengers in your car. Click It or Ticket, created back in 2003, should always sing in your head when jumping into your car. Seatbelts are important to the safety of everyone on the road. Stop.